This episode is brought to you by Vinitaly International Academy, the toughest Italian wine program. 1,000 candidates have produced 262 Italian wine ambassadors to date. Next courses in Hong Kong, Russia, New York, and Verona. Think you make the cut? Apply now at vinitalyinternational.com.
Welcome to this special Italian wine podcast broadcast. This episode is a recording off Clubhouse, the popular drop-in audio chat. This Clubhouse session was taken from the Wine Business Club and Italian Wine Club. Listen in as wine lovers and experts alike engage in some great conversation on a range of topics in wine. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinepodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. And remember to subscribe and rate our show wherever you tune in.
My name's Stevie Kim, and welcome to the Italian Wine Club, the Clubhouse, Italian Wine Clubhouse here. I think it's been nearly a year since we've started the Italian Wine Club, and we've been hosting pretty much every week since the get-go. So today, you know what the deal is here, right? Or you know the drill. This is called the Ambassadors Corner, and today it's a fireside chat with Clemens Lageder. And our guest host is Stefan Metzner, one of our Italian wine ambassadors. So this is where basically our ambassadors get a chance to interview their favorite producer. So you know that this is on replay, and thank you so much, very, very much from the bottom of our heart, from our team, for joining us at Italian Wine Podcast, because this does get replayed on the podcast. As you've known, I've been touting that we've started in 2017 and with 23,000 listens, and we've ramped that up very, very quickly to last year, and we've had 1 million listens last year just on SoundCloud. And believe it or not, in January we had 200,000 listens, and this is all thanks to also the Ambassadors Corner, one of our most popular episodes and on the Italian Wine Podcast. So today I'd like to introduce to you your guest host from our Masterclass, Stefan Metzner. Ciao, Stefan.
Ciao, Stevie. How are you doing?
So where are you now?
Actually, I'm based in Munich, and right now I'm home in my office.
And what is the situation with COVID in Germany right now, in Munich in particular?
Well, it is a little bit very confusing because every Bundesland means every state has quite various regulations. Being in Bavaria makes it rather relaxed, so we have no more forced closing times in restaurants. It's all open, but you need to be vaccinated. That's about all. The rest becomes a rather normal life.
So have you gone back to kind of your normal, work life in the wine realm at least? Are you doing tastings? Are you teaching?
Yeah.
Traveling much?
Well, traveling is still a little bit unsecure because the regulations from other countries are changing constantly. Mm-hmm. But I run a WSET wine school in Munich, and I'm teaching all year long. All my classes can be done, so that's very good. And also, I organized the first 2 tastings, live tastings, after nearly 2 years, and it seems that restrictions will be lowered, and it becomes more easy to go back to your regular life. So basically right now we are in a really comfortable situation where you can say, as long as people are vaccinated and they're wearing the mask wherever it's needed, you can have a normal life, a part of that.
Okay, so Stefan, for those of you who've not met him, he started his career as a somm. And he is, like he's just mentioned, that a certified WSET educator. He runs a school. It's called Wine Institute München, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, my German. This is the reason why I go to Roost.
Yes.
Okay. And then here in his bio, it says he's been in the wine business for 3 decades. That kind of makes you sound like you're old.
Unfortunately, that's true. I can't deny it anymore.
Yeah, we're all dating ourselves. So listen, and of course he has various certification. He is, like I said, the most important thing about him is that he is, of course, our Via Italian Wine ambassador. He's also teaches courses for us, so he is a certified Italian wine educator, and he's also specialist in Valpolicella. So tell us why you have chosen Clemens Lageder as your favorite producer today.
Well, when I started with Tenuta Lageder, that was in 1994, just to give you an impression of how old I really am. I was already impressed not only by the wines, but also by the way Alois, so Clemens' father, approached winemaking and his entire running of the business. And that has continuously developed in an impressive manner since then. And then when Clemens took over, he followed that direction in a more or even more holistic, sustainable approach to winemaking, continuously improving the processes and actions. And I'm very lucky to have been welcomed to his winery several times meanwhile and see firsthand and learn about that development since then.
Okay, so how long did you work at Lageder?
Well, I did not work at Lageder. I took over a retail, so my wine business in 94. And Lageder Wines.
You started working with Lageder.
Yeah, and Lageder Wines then already were in the portfolio. And soon after I took over, one of my first visits to wineries from the portfolio was one to the Lageder winery, which then was run by Alois Lageder. And since then, I'm a big fan of both the people and, well, as Lageders as people, as well as the producers, and of course the wines.
So, we always ask this question too, because we try to get a little bit geeky about the calls that we do. We have fun, but we want to be a little bit educational, right? So what should we expect from this call? What are the learning objectives that we should bear in mind?
I think that we have agreed on, everybody has agreed on, when we talk about sustainability, we refer to actions taken in the vineyard and maybe in the cellar, and that is enormously important, no doubt. However, we will broaden the spectrum of sustainability and talk about social sustainability as well. And then we will talk in that context about his new projects, which is, first of all, a project that Clemens introduced to the winery, which is the Comet wines, his rediscovery or refocusing on autochthonous, old, ancient Italian varieties. And we thought that we do this best by talking about it and then later share tasting expressions of a Valpolicella out of his latest Comet series that Clemens previously shared with me.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I'm just going to grab a drink. I actually have it in my my podcast booth already because 3 of our colleagues, friends, came by to celebrate their diploma. So we have 3 more Italian diploma holders.
Congratulations, big achievement.
It was Luca and Giovanni and Nicola, but also Xiaowen. She's just finished. And I see Anda in the audience, and as well as Renata from our school. So really, really excited about that. Congratulations to them very, very much. Okay, I'm going to leave you. I will shut up, which, that rarely happens. So you should take advantage of that, Stefan, as you know. And I will pop by later if there are any questions from the audience, if there's any time. Okay? Ciao, ragazzi.
Thank you, Stevie. Thanks. All right. So everybody in the audience, thanks for joining us. And thank you, Clemens, for being here. Why don't you just, give us a brief introduction of who you are and what your bio is so far, and maybe together with an overview of the history and the development of your winery.
I'm extremely happy to join, and I'm delighted that you have chosen our winery for this call and for the podcast. So thanks a lot for that. And my name is Clemens Lageder, and I'm the 6th generation in our winery. And together with my two sisters, I'm leading the winery since 1.5 years. And I joined actually the winery in 2015. I was on the road for approximately 10, 11 years, experiencing different things. Started actually with sociology, and after my degree, I went to Geisenheim, and then I went to Burgundy. And from that moment on, I went to New York to experience a little bit also the market and the business side of the business. And then I went to Luxembourg to work for an agriculture company who was dealing with also not only wine but also food and biodynamic food and all the other different products. And then I came back in 2015, and my father and I spoke about our future plans and how we want to proceed. And then slowly, my father gave over the winery to me, and then also my two sisters joined and are involved now. So that's a little bit about my bio.
Thank you, Clemens. So when Alois finally gave over the winery to the next generation, and you split it with your two sisters, which part of the winery did you take over, or which part of the wine production do you focus on?
There's always a difference between ownership and responsibility. And for me, it was important that, of course, in Italy, or I think in other parts of the world as well, that in our past generation, it was more common to give the winery to one person, which for me it wasn't interesting or not the case. I didn't felt it right, and so I was more looking forward that all three of us would have similar shares or the same shares. So that's from ownership. And then there's a difference of course, being responsible. And there, I in a certain way, are the CEO of the winery. And I'm more focusing on the production side, so on winemaking and on agriculture. And my younger sister, she joined in 2018 and took over from my side the whole marketing and PR area, and more also certain markets like more the Asian markets, also certain parts of Europe. I'm more focused in certain areas in Europe and also US and Canada more. And then our older sister, she is organizing, for example, Summa, which is a wine fair which we held in our winery, where we have also 100 other wineries from all over the world invited, which this year will finally take place again on the 9th and 10th of April. And so she's organizing these kind of events, major events in our winery.
A lot of things to do. You are a big winery after all. So when you took over, you followed straight on in the footpath of biodynamic wine production. Let's see, at the stage when you, say, joined the winery, how did you further develop? And is there anything that you can share what you're planning for the foreseeable future?
Well, many things, because I think biodynamic, it's an ideal where you can get close to, but Rudolf Steiner lived 100 years ago, and the world completely changed in the last 100 years. So I don't think that I think that we need to reinterpret it also biodynamics and bring it to the current situation, the current life. And so when I joined, I think I would say that maybe at the beginning, when my father started with biodynamics in 2004, or he already did start to experiment in the 90s, but I would say that he converted all our family-owned vineyards of 55 hectares in 2004. I would say that at that time, you need to think there were no consultants, there were a few wineries doing biodynamic, maybe in Burgundy or in France, but in Italy it was kind of not many people knew about it, or especially in the practice. And so I think they focused more on the preparation. They focused more on reading Steiner, to understand how and what he thought about how to deal with lunar cycles and the planetarial system. And I think the generation, my generation, of course, preparations are important. The lunar cycles are important as well. But I think my generation can focus also, thanks to the experience of my father's generation. We can focus more on developing the whole system and to trying to build a holistic approach. And that's when we see it as actually as a very pragmatical approach, where we need to break up monoculture. That's the main goal. And we need to, the reason why we need to break up monoculture is because we need to focus on fertility of our soils. And a good farmer 100 years ago he exactly knew that he only is capable to increase fertility through building up biodiversity. So I think that my approach is more was how can we bring in cows in the rows and in the vineyards, and how can we bring sheep in the vineyards? How can we work better with compost and with manure? How can we dig in deeper in the whole cover crop system and these kind of things, and where to seed which cover crop in order to increase diversity on different root system and so on. So I think this thanks to the experience and to the more theoretical approach, maybe from the older generation, we were then able to bring it to another step and bring it to a more practical approach.
Sounds like approach. Yeah, sounds like a lot of work, and I'm soon trying to dig in that holistic concept. But before we do that, I want to go back. So you said in 2004 you had 55 hectares. How big is the winery now, and how much do you own, and how much do you sort of rent? And also, how many wines are you producing? I'm not talking volume in bottles, but different labels.
The winery itself, we still have approximately 55 hectares, so maybe change some vineyards, but I would say from a family point of view, it stayed the same. What we developed was we in Alto Adige. It's an old tradition to collaborate with small farmers. I mean, a farmer normally has the average approximately 1.5 hectares. So it's an old tradition that farmers sell the grapes on a trust base in a certain way. So it's all by handshake. And so we work approximately with 80-90 farmers. With some of them, even though it's just a handshake contract, with more than 40-50 years. And so here there's a little bit more movement, maybe, especially now that we decided, or 10 years ago, we started to motivate our farmers slowly to work organically and biodynamically. And at the moment, we have approximately 80% of those 80 farmers, 90 farmers, are working organically and biodynamically. And we set ourselves the goal that in 2025 we want to be, 24 we want to have all our farmers converted to organic and biodynamic, so all the 100%. So that's why there will be a little movement, because some of the farmers, and we need to accept it, they don't want to deal with organic or biodynamic farming at all, and we might lose those farmers. But there are certain new ones who are coming up and who are more interested in working their vineyards in an organic or biodynamic way. So we get maybe a phone call and saying where new farmers might join the club in a certain way. And so there's a movement which I would say in total we have approximately 150, 160 hectares we're dealing with.
That's quite a substantial amount of grapes. So how many different labels do you produce out of that?
Approximately, with the Comet series, which are wines that change from every year actually, we do have approximately 45.
Do you have a rough estimate of the split between white and red wines?
Yeah, I would say that Alto Adige nowadays is approximately, and I would say the same is for us, approximately 65-70 white, and the rest is red, and which actually in Alto Adige, not that long time ago, 30 years ago, was the complete, or 40 years ago, was the complete opposite. Alto Adige was known much more for red grapes, and especially Schiava and Lagrein. and now it's more known for whites.
Thank you. So for those who have missed the part I didn't say, which is hard to miss anyway, the Alois Lageder winery is located in Margreid, which is the southern west part. So it's on the western slopes of Alto Adige, where you do have a slight more moderate climate than in the northern parts. Therefore, you can have more focus on red wines because you have a longer ripening period and a warmer climate than the far north. Now let's go to the main topic. I mean, everybody is talking about sustainability these days, but in my understanding, when you followed up, you took a different level in this holistic approach to sustainability. You've talked about how to break up monoculture, how to gain the measurements in order to get the fertility of the soils at least constant, if not even increasing them, by introducing cover crops and by introducing farm animals within the vineyards. But there is also a wider range in being holistic. So how do you do the biological and social environment? What are you doing in those aspects?
Yeah, that's a good question, which we continuously, I think, need to develop. I think it's not only about the agricultural part. No, I mean that's plays a big role, and I think it's getting more important not only to save emission or reduce emission, but especially we farmer, we have a huge responsibility in trying to find ways in saving or how can you say it, fixing more CO2 in the soil. So that's why it's, I think, important to increase fertility and the humus of our vineyards. But then, of course, for example, I don't know, my father already in the 1995 started to build a new winery where he only used alternative energy systems, so no fuel, no gas, for example, or everything is by gravity fed. I think now what we did, we moved all our wines in lightweight glass bottles. So far, 450 grams, and now we're gonna reduce them to 420 grams. And the tricky thing is that, of course, the consumer still today thinks a lot about that, or often you have the feeling that a good bottle of wine needs to have a high weight in a certain way. No, and this is, I think, something what we need to change, because it's crazy how much CO2 and how much emissions you can reduce in moving to a lighter glass bottle. So this is, I think, something what needs to be also developed, and we a couple of 2-3 years we also get rid of the capsula, which is made with through heavy metals or out of heavy metal, and we close it with a paper ribbon. So I think there are many things in order to which we need to develop and to get better and better. And I think, of course, it should not only be my intention, but it should also be that's something what we are working on, the intention of all our employees, and that's why I think we need to give also the possibility that everyone thinks in a similar direction.
I imagine that's quite a challenge. I mean, with 160 hectares, it's not you and your father running the entire thing. You need to have a lot of people following your ideas and being sort of as well adapted to this developing system. But I also agree that, perfection is not one thing. Perfection, by definition, in my book, is to get a million small things right. And this is lighter bottles and lighter, more eco-friendly packaging and less CO2 carbon footprint by biodynamic. For those who've never been there, make an appointment and go there. The gravitational system, the chilling system, the solar panels, it's really state of the art. And then when they tell you when it was built, I think it is quite a leading a leading winery in that aspect as well. Now, all of these things produce wines more economic, more ecologically sustainable. How do you get it economically sustainable as well? I mean, you need to pay the people, and therefore you need to make some money out of it. How does it work? I mean, can you only just increase prices?
That's a good question. In some way, you need to, but of course, but for increasing prices, you need to do a good job in also making good wine, and at the very end, also marketing your wine. Yeah? I think it's a long way there, where you need maybe to save costs on other hands and or other areas, and slowly, being able to afford it. But I think at the very end, it doesn't really cost that much more in working biodynamically or organically. I mean, maybe at the beginning you need to invest, but I think it's also a little bit life. I mean, if you want to become master of wine, or if you want to become, we just talked about the diploma. I mean, what are you doing? You need to invest time, you need to invest money, and of course the risk is that you will never be a master of wine or diploma, or you will never get the diploma. I think that's a little bit similar with our approach in winemaking. And I think also here, of course, at the beginning you need to learn, you need to invest, maybe you do some errors, it costs money, maybe it costs a little bit more time. But I think at the very end, on a long term, if we do the real balance on a long term, of course it's easier and it's faster to feed our soils with chemical fertilizers, but at the very end, long term, it's more economically sustainable if we think differently about our soils, instead of just feeding them with chemical fertilizers. And that's why I think it depends how you do the calculation. And that's a little bit the thing, our approach in a certain way.
Thanks, Clemens. Just as we have talked about, part of your grape suppliers are still organic, and part of them is already changed to biodynamics. So how much production is fully biodynamic certified, and how much is organic?
For our 55 are all biodynamic. Then I would say from the 100 hectares of our farmers, I would say approximately 20 are not yet organic or biodynamic certified. And from the 80 hectares, I would assume that maybe half of it, from those 80, half of not close, half is biodynamic, a little bit less maybe, and the rest is organic.
So that gives you a majority of biodynamically produced wines.
In total with ours, yes.
Yeah. All right. So the next subject I want to turn to is, when I first visited, I didn't realize, but your father already started quite early, as a visionary as he was or still is. He started quite early to think about alternatives, also with something that nowadays is in everybody's heads and mouths, but he was quite early realizing the problem coming up, which is climate change and also the way of agriculture in your area. If I remember correctly, you have long-term trials with rather unusual grape varieties such as Tannat and others in your winery. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're extremely happy that my father was, I don't know, maybe he got the right sheet in his hand 40 years ago, but he got, by coincidence, interested in climate change. And with a good friend of him, Reinhard Siork, who was also the husband of Elisabetta Foradori, who lived very near, and he was a crazy guy in a certain way, but a very curious guy. And with him, he started to get interested in dealing with new grape varieties, because reading already the first climate models, it was obvious that, it seemed to be obvious that the climate would in a certain way change. And it's nothing new. I mean, climate change always changed, and the climate 100 years ago, it was different than the climate today, and it for sure it will be different again in the next few 100 years. Maybe it should become a little bit more radical, maybe, but there was always a change, and he became interested in that, and he started to. We are lucky in Alto Adige. Of course, we can go high up and build or plant grapes on a higher altitude. The only problem is that, talking about monoculture, if you go high up, you also bring a monoculture to a more natural area in a certain way, where maybe before there was a forest standing. So you can go high up, and you should maybe, but there is a certain limit, I think, what we need to respect. And another possibility is maybe dealing with skin and stem contacts. No? So you can, dealing with skin and stem, the tannins, you increase the salinity maybe of certain grape varieties. But then an important one is what he started also 40 years ago when dealing with, as you said, grapes from warmer climates as Roussanne, Marsanne, Tannat from reds, or Viognier, Petit Monceau, Assyrtiko, dealing Sauvignon. So different experiments with grapes that are more or less coming from southern parts, and he hoped that one day they would ripe, but maintain a beautiful acidity. What now it's actually that is the challenge. So 30, 40 years ago, the question was always, how can we get our grapes ripe? Now it's the complete opposite. Now it's really, how can we, and we're talking about the northern region in Italy. Now it's really, how can we keep the freshness? How can we maintain the acidity? And it's difficult to produce wines in Alto Adige not having the need to acidify the wine. So it's getting more challenging, and especially with grape varieties as Gewürztraminer or Pinot Grigio, grape varieties that are very common and very popular in Alto Adige. They are tending much more to be a little bit more flabby, a little bit more alcoholic, and that's a little bit a thing what we need to find solution of. And maybe dealing with new grape varieties could be one of them. And so we need to observe that, and we're lucky to have experiments and trials of Tannat that are older than 35 years.
That's impressive. It's a rather very mind-boggling concept. I mean, we have the same situation, or had the same situation in Germany, where we used to chaptalize literally 8 out of 10 vintages just to get to 12 ABV. And now people are talking about desugarization of musts and saying this has changed so dramatically just within 2 decades, let's say. Yeah.
And maybe not only because of the climate. Of course, we are talking about different yields as well, especially here in Alto Adige. But I would say climate is a huge factor why this whole thing changed.
I strongly believe it's not only climate. I mean, in Germany, viticulture has focused for more than 200 years in getting it ripe, selecting the better clones, the earlier ripening, the high sugar producing, the more assimilation, photosynthetic active things, and now sort of nobody has the older, more relaxed clones available anymore. But that's a different story. Are you producing wines out of those uncommon southern varieties?
Yes. We have 2 wines that are like for good in the assortment, which are Cazon. One is Cazon Bianco, one is Cazon Rosso. Cazon Bianco is more of a Condrieu style with Viognier, Petit Monceau, and then Roussanne, Marsanne, sometimes Assyrtiko, Chenin Blanc. And the red is 85% of Tannat, which for me is from a red wine perspective one of the most impressive potential grape varieties for Alto Adige, I think, because it keeps beautiful acidity. We harvested, for example, 16 or 17. We harvested with potential alcohol of 30.5, and Tannat always changes also the color of the stem, so it to a more brown color. So that's a good sign that it's ripening. But with the acidity of 10 grams per liter, we don't even have that on the whites. So it's impressive how Tannat might be an interesting grape variety for our area. But then we also have the Comets, which is a project we started 2016, and We have more than 120 experiments each year, which we bring in the cellar. Experiments could be, as you said, new grape varieties we were experimenting, or it could be what happens with the Pinot Bianco on skin and stamp for 6 months, or what happened with the Chardonnay when we don't sulfur it, everything. I mean, we're a young team, we have many questions, and we want to try to find answers. And of course, we're going to do mistakes, and I think a comment for us, or let's say an experiment, it's extremely important for us to learn out of those mistakes. And a comment is something what these are wines that we select every year, 5 to 6, 7, 8 comments. So experiments we bottle and we share with our customers, with our partners, and of course limited quantities. But a comment from a historical point of view is something that is in the sky, which leads you, which shows you also the future a little bit, no? And in a very similar way, we're looking at those experiments. They help you to get to know limits. They help you to go beyond limits, and they help you to make mistakes and to learn out of those mistakes. And those comments or those wines can be Anasirti or Roussanne. It can be something. I wouldn't say that these are our best wines. It's not a Löwengang where we try to optimize every single detail. But they are really wines that are maybe also forgotten for 3-4 years in the barrel in the last corner of our winery, and all of a sudden we discover them again. No? So this is a little bit the approach with those experiments and all the experiments which we bring then in the bottle as a comment.
Yeah, I love your original. When you first told me, I literally fell in love with the explanation of why you call them comets. It's like a shining star. It shows you the way, but it's not there always. So the next year, the comet might be a different one, or this one might just not be available until it comes around next time. Mm-hmm. So now going back to what we promised in the introduction is the interest in new varieties combating viticultural problems, maybe climate change or otherwise, such as Tannat, Roussanne, Marsanne, but also you have a strong interest in ancient, more or less forgotten, autochthonous Alto Adige varieties. Besides Blattele, what else do you have? In Groncho Manzoni, which is not autochthonous, it's a cross. Mm-hmm. But what else do you have in that sector?
It's interesting that in Alto Adige we still have 2 autochthonous indigenous grape varieties people know or talk about, and that's Chiava and Lagrange. But 40, 50 years ago we had Blattele, Fasol, and Fraueler, a little bit of Portuguese, which is not indigenous in Alto Adige, but was very well developed here. And especially Blattele was a grape variety that was very popular, especially also in the Valle Isarco area. And then Blattele was, Fraueler was more in the Merano area, so I don't know how familiar you are with Alto Adige. But we had 3 other indigenous grape varieties, and they completely got forgotten. And they were also forgotten. People forgot to register those grapes as grape varieties. So it's not even, or now yes, because the institute, the Limburg Institute, the research institute, started to experiment with those again. And so now finally you can again, as of course not a DOC wine, but you can grow them again since 1 year. No, but in the last 40 years, they were illegal to plant and to make wine out of it. And they were, luckily enough, there were certain fighters like Heinrich Meyer from Nussehof for Blattele, or certain small farmers for Schnalzuberhof for Fraueler, for example, or other small farmers who were keeping secretly those old plants in a certain way, no? And fighting for the future of this indigenous grape varieties. And we contacted certain farmers and also Heinrich Meyer, and we started to get interested in those indigenous grape varieties because, I don't know, maybe our question was why have they been here and what was the reason? And could they be, with a changing climate, be interesting again in future? And you need to think that a Blattele, for example, 40 years ago now, everyone speaks about skin stem contact or orange wine and these kind of things. 40, 50 years ago, this was completely normal because every single wine did at least several hours was kept in contact with skins and stems, because normally the bull was coming to pick up the grapes in the field, and the bull only came once a day, and that was the evening, to pick the whole track and to tractor and to bring it to the cellar in a certain way. So the grapes that you harvest in the morning, they kept there in the shiny sun for at least 12 hours. And so already starting to macerate and to ferment on the skins and the stems. And maybe this was something that this technique and this vinification with the mechanization, everything started to change. And all of a sudden, people got rid of skin of the ox, and they got much faster to the winery, and techniques changed. And also in the cellar, you were not using any more skin and stem contact. So people forgot the interest in those grape varieties, and Blattele has a very thin skin, and maybe it wasn't interesting enough anymore, and maybe also it was maybe too sour, because those grapes were 40 years ago producing very acidic wines, no? But that's why I think maybe bringing not the oxen back, but bringing the skin stem contact back and those grapes back, and also maybe in a changing climate where those grapes are not that acidic maybe as 40 years ago, but maybe now in the future they could be interesting again. And I think, there was a reason why they have been here, and it might be interesting for the future to have them again. Of course, someone could also argue and say there's also a reason why they don't exist anymore. But that's something what we would like to discover, and that's why we focused on those 3 indigenous grape varieties and replant them in our vineyards, and let's see how they develop and what experiences we're gonna make.
So as I mentioned, you were generous enough to share the latest or the newest edition of a Comet wine, which is a Blattele, with me, and we've tasted the wine. Could you maybe tell us just briefly the winemaking techniques you applied to that particular wine, and then maybe we talk about the sensory profile of it?
So Blattele that's a wine actually that is not yet released, and it's not going to be released this year in the coming years. We just bottled it, and we want to see how it develops with how it ages actually in the bottle. So it might be released next year in 2 years. It's a very, I would say fresh approach. So of course, it was kept on skins and stems here as well for several weeks in order to get a little bit more out of the skin. But it's a very raw version of Blattele. So I was thinking twice before sending it to you, because it's still very raw and unfinished in my opinion. But as I said here, the question was how Blattele develops when we bottle it, because normally we wait 2-3 years before bottling the Blattele, and this time we really wanted to make it the opposite and bottle it very early and to see how it develops in the bottle then.
Thanks for sharing. It's a really nice wine. So I would think, how do we want to do this? I just go through my tasting notes so that everybody has an idea of what this tastes like in this stage, and then we discuss a little further. Or do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
No. So I would say it's an absolute bone dry white wine, and it shows pronounced aromas. There is ripe green and yellow kernel fruits such as apples and pears. There is some quince. There is quite some citrus notes, lemon and lemon scale, and in the stage now, it is slightly cloudy, so there is, of course, yeasty aromas of dough and brioche. And there is a prominent note of cider, natural, unfiltered apple juice, and some bruised apple. It's bone dry. It has an integrated, yes, vibrant, crisp acidity, medium plus body, and a very rich and creamy mouthfeel. The alcohol, I would guess, from the tasting is at around 13. It's moderate, fully integrated. And there's a touch of phenolic grip on the mid palate, which is just giving extra complexity and is not too much. Then the finish is very long, lingering. It is absolutely very youthful, and it shows an excellent balance of all structural components. And actually, I can't wait to see where this goes over the next 4 to 6 years. I think it's a good representative of what you call a comet within the concept.
Yeah. I think I'm also very curious how it will develop, because as you mentioned, I forgot to say that it's unfiltered. So also here the question is what happens with an unfiltered wine and with unfiltered Blattele in this bottle, and how it will develop. And the alcohol is very low; it's 11. If I'm not mistaken, I also only have the unlabeled version, but it's quite low. It's strange that also Vasolen and Frauele are producing predominantly or most of the time very low alcoholic wines,
which is an absolute plus in the future.
I think so as well.
Yeah, as we have talked, that now we are looking into desugarization of musts and getting those unbalanced high ABVs out of the way, and are struggling with that now.
Yeah, but I think this is also something what we need to learn from the beginning, because so far we were always looking for clones who were producing sugar and producing at the same time certain yields, and I think now and we were going out there and measuring sugar in a certain way before harvest, which in my opinion doesn't make any sense at all anymore. And there's another possibility, measuring acidity, and also here in alkalinity it doesn't make any sense at all, because sugar is always too high and acidity is always too low nowadays. And so I think also here our approach needs to be especially different when deciding the harvest time. And this is something what we need to get better in general. I think a lot better in defining ripeness, and we define ripeness to crunchiness. And so there's this moment where the grape is extremely in this crunchy phase where it's like a salad that you would pick, and 3 days, if you put the salad 3 days in the fridge, it starts to get a little bit, I don't know, it's shriveled, so how do you say that? It's losing its tension. And I think this is what we don't want to find in our wines and in the grapes. So we need to really try to find the right harvest time to find this crunchiness. I think this is something what in general we need to change our approach of ripeness in making wine.
Yeah. You mentioned yield quite a few times. What's the yielding capacity of Vasolen and Frauele and Blattele? Can you bring them to a high yield, or are they really scarce in production?
They shouldn't be that low. To be very honest, Vasolen, what we saw now in the last years was quite low in our field, but maybe we did a mistake because we put it on the Guyot system instead of the pergola. And Vasolen, of course, normally was all of those three were all trellised on or how do you say, trellised on pergola. So maybe I think this could be a game changer. And Blattele is doing quite okay from the yields. So you do also 55, 60 hectoliters per hectare on the Guyot system, and Frauele is also a little bit lower there.
So you can really make it sort of sustainable while growing it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So within those 2020 comets, can you sort of lift the blanket and tell us what other wines will be in that range in the comet section?
Yeah, I can tell you. So one is going to be, I told you before that about the friendship with Reinhard Sirock. Reinhard Sirock was, husband of Elisabetta Foradori, and he was a crazy and very knowledgeable guy. and he had his own private selection of 300 different grape varieties from all over the world. He really was flying around the world and collecting branches and bring those branches to Ladeger, and we have a plot of his collection or his private selection, and there are more than 300 grape varieties in that, red, white, all together, all mixed. And in the last few years, we had a different approach on that plot. So last year we harvested, or we vinified the red grapes as white wines, as a white wine, and the white as a red, so longer skin and stem contact. And this year, for example, we're gonna vinify the reds as reds and the white as white. So it's going to be a red wine this year. Last year, actually, it was a white wine. So it's going to be called T because it's an homage on his person, and he was called T-Rock. And so it's assemblage of or field blend of those 300 different grape varieties, red and white mixed, for example. That's one. And there will be a Souvenir Gris, a blend of 3 different vintages of Souvenir Gris, and which were kept on whole cluster. And several more. So I can't list everything, but
yeah, sure.
2 of them.
So Souvenir Gris is a Piwi variety, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so that's a new crossing. Piwi is a German word which stands for Pilzwiderstandsfähig, which is translated into a high tolerance or high resistance to fungal diseases, just for those who are not so familiar with Souvenir Gris. As there is the last question about within the time frame, having a field blend and making whites in a red style, a red in a white style, is nothing really new. I mean, it was, the very tradition was a field blend. And also you've been mentioning the pergola. So now we have sort of several ideas that you follow of ancient techniques, that's having ancient varieties which are adapted to the region, having a field blend mixed, which is a traditional method. And so my question is to what you mentioned before, do you see more coming advantages of using the pergola system instead of the modern machine-adapted Guyot or Cordon training systems?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you need to keep on track on the yield, because pergola could produce way too much grapes, so you need to cut them down, you need to be behind. But I think from a climate perspective, it can be very interesting, and because of 2 arguments. One, it gives you shade to the grapes, of course, so it protects a little bit more the grapes. But I would say the more interesting argument is because it has, of course, more wood, or let's say old wood. So the pergola is a trellising system which is higher and, of course, longer. And because of that, I think the pergola has the possibility to where you can increase, again, the quantity, the yield, but without immediately losing quality. And I think on the Guyot system, if you want to increase a little bit the yield, you suffer immediately, the quality suffers immediately. And I think in future, I mean, I remember when I started to work in the wine business 15 years ago, on my first trips, everyone was so proud saying, I only produced 30-35 hectoliters from this vineyard and so on. Everyone thought that if you produce only 30-35 hectoliters from a hectare, it must be a mind-blowing wine. And that was maybe the case. But the problem is, I think in future, with the changing climate, and we already reduced the yield in the past, the grapes are getting too concentrated. And I think that's why we should aim for a little bit higher yield. I don't want to go in the other extreme direction, but at least a tiny bit we need to increase it to have more balanced concentration and not too concentrated grapes, because then it would lead us to alcoholic wines. And I think increasing the yield a little bit the Barolo could be interesting again.
Thank you, Clemens. We are about close to our finish time, but we have a few more minutes. And I would say thank you very much for all your explanation, and thank you for sharing all that insight into your winery. Thanks for having me in your home. And thanks for sharing all of this with the Italian Wine Podcast.
Thank you very much.
If there is any questions from the audience that might be interested, or questions from Stevie or Laika or Joy, that would be a good time now.
Okay. So, very great job, you guys. Thank you so much. That was so exhaustive and very, very complete podcast indeed. We've learned so much about Lageder and his philosophy of wine making. I will entertain, it's getting kind of late, but I will entertain one question if anybody has a question. Laika, have you got a question for Alois?
Actually, I have one curious question, because I was also reading an article in Grape Collective about your interview. Clemens, you mentioned that you met Rudolf. You knew something about this, but when you started. Okay, so sorry. Here's my question. When did you really start wanting to pursue about biodynamic winemaking?
Personally?
Yes.
When I studied sociology, during my sociology studies, and I wasn't so sure if I want to join a winery at that time, and we were extremely happy that our father gave us the possibility to do whatever we wanted to, and then if we wanted, we could come back. And so during my sociology studies, I started to read it, and it was impressive. It was extremely difficult as well, and maybe I don't know, for sure I didn't really understood what he was saying. But it was interesting impulses, and I think that's a little bit how I see biodynamics and the ideas of Rudolf Steiner, more as impulse, more as ideas. And I mean, he talked also a lot of heavy stuff. So you need to take certain things out of his theories, but in my opinion, it's not exaggerated it in a certain way. But it triggered me, and that's why I started to read more and were eager to learn a little bit more about it.
Okay, great. I think that is all. I'm going to wrap this up and close up the room. I just want to remind everybody, thank you. First of all, Clemens, thank you so much for joining us. Stefan, what a great job. And I just want to remind everyone, next week we're going back to the 6 p.m. slot, our usual time. Julian Farker will be interviewing Amanda Courtney. The week after that, Ashley Howell with Piluca Proietti. And then Vittoria Cecchi with Michael Schmelzer, and Fanny Brule with Federico Giuntini, and Gatifa Servapiana, Wayne Young with the Rapuzzi brothers, on and on and on. So we have a complete calendar up to April, all set to go. So you hope you can join us, and don't forget to subscribe to Italian Wine Podcast, and have a good night, everyone. Ciao ragazzi.
Ciao. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ciao, everybody.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, chin chin.
Hi guys,
guys. I'm Joy Livingston, and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love, and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to ItalianWinePodcast.com.